we can kick it off. I want to welcome each and every one of you today for our Eminae CEO Forum. We have various educational series, and this one happens to be on EOS. My name is Kyle Griffith. I am the CEO and founder of Eminae. I also manage a merger and acquisitions company called the NYBB Group, based here in New York. And this evening, we have an expert panel that's going to be sharing their insights on EOS and how it's helped them grow their business, build their business. So if you may go to the next slide, please. A little bit about Eminae, for those of you that are new to the Eminae network. We have about 40 companies that make up our network, and they span from different backgrounds, from legal services, accounting services, business consultants, you name it. As a business owner, and for those of you that have clients as business owners, you know that is a lot that's needed to run a business, and sometimes it can be very stressful. We don't all, as business owners, know it all, and we need to bring the right people on board to help us. My thing is that you're always in transition. So even though the theme of M&A involves our mergers and acquisitions, my thought process is that you're always in transition, you're always growing, and things are always moving. There's turnover in employees, you're learning new things, you're bringing on new products and new services. So M&A Network, we are comprised of a group of trusted advisors that help business owners with their various business activities. So we have about 3 to 5 events a month. We have roundtable events, which is geared towards business professionals. And if you don't mind keeping yourself on mute so we can have a clear session, so if one can help out with that, I appreciate it. So we have roundtable events, which is geared towards professionals to help them and help their clients with their business. And we have today, which is going to be on a CEO Forum, which is geared towards CEOs and owners of companies. So I'm going to turn it over to our host and moderator, and Roy Pellicano. He's going to introduce the speakers and pretty much set the stage for what you're going to expect for the remainder of our session today. Roy is one of our key advisors with our group. He's on our education committee and very instrumental in putting this event together. He runs a business and consulting company. He has extensive background in IT, very well-rounded consultant, from helping folks with their finances to helping them with their IT services and advising clients in different types of business endeavors. So I'm going to turn it over to Roy, and Roy is going to set the stage for what we're going to expect and introduce all the speakers. So thank you guys once again. And Roy, the floor is yours, my friend. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kyle. And thank you for, pulling M&A together and pulling this team together. It is constantly amazing me as to the talent that's in the room. And I love it. You can see some of that talent here on the screen just by the people that we can pull into a room and a conversation like this. First of all, we need to recognize the Education Committee, Winnie Benjamin, Ken Pichelle, we have Austin and Andy as well. Thank you guys for helping support me and Kyle and giving me the opportunity to serve everyone here. We're joined today with an incredible panel. We pulled in CEOs who have experience with and varied experiences with EOS. And really trying to implement it in their own organization. And their experience has taught me a lot as I've learned about how they've implemented EOS and everything that they've done to make their company successful. For those of you who are not familiar with EOS in and of itself, we are going to have a quick introduction by Mitch, who is an implementer. He will take us through the background of EOS. If you're familiar with it, I'm sure you'll embrace what he has to say and maybe even learn something. The panelists, we will then introduce the panelists at that time, and we'll jump into the panel discussion. And then ultimately we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Feel free to put your questions into the chat so that we can see them, but we are calling on people. We want this to be an interactive session. So your involvement in this is critical to this being a success. So we want to make sure that you guys have that involvement. So thank you so much. And our panelists today, we have Mitchell York, who is our EOS implementer. We have John Bentley, who's the former CEO of RAA Financial Advisors. Tremendous story there about what he was able to achieve. And he does attribute it, does attribute that success to the EOS implementation. Chris Coluccio, who is in the process of building his organization and has embraced EOS as a way of trying to grow that with a great amount of mindfulness and maturity. Bob Lewis, who has not just grown his own organization, but has grown many organizations that are tied to his all around EOS. And he's implemented it, again, not just in his own organization, but across other organizations in very unique ways, which we will hear about. Again, there's myself and Kyle. So thank you. And again, we're just because buyers don't want to buy a company with unresolved issues. So we want to keep that in mind as we move forward. Mitch, it's on to you.
Great. So Roy, I think what I'm going to do is just have each of the panelists introduce themselves briefly and kind of give a couple of minute high level view of their journey with their own organizations and the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And after we do that, then I'll walk you through some of the principles of EOS. Does that sound right? Great. So John, let me start with you. Down in Texas, on a ranch, surrounded by interesting nature. Maybe we'll get to see it depending on how things go. John, give us a high-level view of where you are, where you sit, and your experience with EOS in just a couple of minutes. Fire away.
Yeah, thank you, Mitch. John Bentley, RAA Financial Advisors. We are a financial advisory firm that I took over as CEO in Q1 of 2016. And I was formerly a private equity guy and was doing acquisitions for the firm. Due to a health incident, I was elevated to CEO. And I got two great pieces of advice. One is, John, you have to lead your way. Don't try to do what the former CEO did. And so I went on a journey to sort of discover what my leadership style was. And a good friend of mine who runs HVAC company said, you ought to read Traction. And so I read Traction and really enjoyed it, loved the methodical processes. And within a couple of weeks, was on the phone with the EOS headquarters trying to find an implementer. And we were connected with Jill Young. We implemented in September of 2016. And it just was real. We made an acquisition nearly simultaneously. So it actually did help us with the integration because we were all on the same footing. We were all learning EOS, the processes at the same time. We grew the company for the next 3 years. And then we sold in January of 2020 to a larger firm. And I think one of the benefits of EOS was that I believe we attracted a premium multiple during the sale process due to the fact that we had outstanding processes. We had leaders throughout the company that are now leading the larger company. And I think one of the things, and I can expand on this later, Mitch, but you know, we did a valuation each year for our stock option plan. We also got valuation experts come in before we engaged of an investment banker. And those multiples were in the 6 to 8 range of EBITDA. And we ended up selling for 11 times EBITDA in January of 2020, which I give that premium the credit to the EOS and the processes and just the people development that we were able to accomplish over the last 3 years.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Do we get to see what's around you? Is that convenient, or can you not show us?
Oh yeah, yeah. I have to sit outside because our cell service, internet service at the ranch is pretty bad. But
those are John's cattle back there. If anyone else on the call has cattle in their backyard, let us know in the chat, and we'll let you show them.
Yeah.
But we did think that John was probably the only one who has his own cattle. So thank you very much, John. That was awesome. Bob, I'm going to go next to you. Bob is a CEO of a franchisor, and that's very interesting too, because there have been quite a number of franchises that have implemented EOS at the franchisor level and at the franchisee level. So Bob, would you give us a couple of minutes and tell us about your journey?
Sure. Thank you, Mitch. Thanks for having me on the panel. My name is Bob Lewis. I'm the founder and CEO of Closet and Storage Concepts and More Space Place. We're as Mitch said, a national franchisor. We are in the home improvement, home furnishings, custom closets, space-saving home furnishings business. We are the franchisor. We have 43 franchised cities in 18 states. And I started the company in 1987 here in southern New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia. Franchised the business in 2000 and grew through the late 2008-09 until the financial crisis hit, which kind of stalled us out, and we lost some franchisees due to that crisis in 2009 and 2010. But we came out of it strong financially and in a good position. And in 2013, had the opportunity to acquire a competing franchise system called More Space Place. And that acquisition doubled the size of the company overnight, basically. And a lot of moving parts. Our headquarters in New Jersey, their headquarters were in Florida, in Clearwater, Florida. Fortunately, the franchisee units did not overlap each other. They were actually very complementary in terms of parts of the country we did business. So we didn't have a lot of problems with that. But we had tremendous integration problems. The company doubling in size that quickly really presented all the weaknesses in both organizations. And although we were a strong company and the company we were acquiring had been through some very difficult times, never really recovered after the recession, which created the opportunity for us. The acquisition itself and the integration of the two businesses, especially with the geographic distances, really exposed all the weaknesses in our company. And so we came to the EOS system pretty honestly, actually, because we needed it. We were in a lot of pain by the summer of 2015 when we brought in an implementer to implement EOS into the business. We were in a lot of pain. So if any of you have read some of the books, Get a Grip and Traction, of course, if you're familiar with those books and they talk about the pain that they were all in, that's what brought us to EOS. And since that time, after we successfully implemented it, we have literally doubled the average unit volumes of all of our franchises. So our system-wide sales are roughly double what they were at the time we implemented EOS. So as you might imagine, I'm a fairly big fan of the system.
Bob, thank you. That was great. And finally, Chris Coluccio, who is CEO of TechWorks Consulting here on Long Island. And Chris, unlike Bob and John, Chris has primarily self-implemented EOS in his company, although we've worked together a bit. I came in and kind of did a tune-up with you guys. And so, Chris, tell us a little bit about the company and how you got into EOS.
Great, thanks, Mitch. I appreciate it. So So yeah, TechWorks is a what we call a managed service provider, outsourced IT company. We provide outsourced IT services for small and medium-sized businesses. We've done that both mostly on Long Island, but we've done it around the globe, where we've supported companies and their organizations either to support their IT staff that needed extra services, or in a lot of cases completely supplement their IT staff, giving them better services with usually a return on investment for that. So that's pretty much what we do. And I guess the funny thing is that I was introduced to Traction, I would want to say in about 2013. I actually saw a keynote by Gino Wickman at a panel that I was at a conference that I was at. And that book sat on my shelf right next to my dresser for probably about 4 years, if not longer than that. And then about 2 years ago, I was having a real tough time with a partner. Business was struggling. We had a lot of debt. I didn't know where we were going. My partner decided he wanted to move up to Albany. So I met with a mediator who was a friend of mine, and he handed me the Traction book, and I'm like, you don't need to give it to me. I already got it. So I decided to read it. And as I read that book, instantaneously, I knew that this was the way for us to go. I'm one of those people who probably read just about every business book I could get my hands on, Good to Great, E-Myth, every one of them. And this was the first one that put all of those concepts down in a real tangible way to run a business from beginning to end. And as I was going through that mediation process with my partner, I decided that we were going to implement EOS. I shut my doors for like 2 weeks and just went into it and got my leadership staff and my partner all to agree to go off site and at least start this process. Through that, we set up our culture and core values. And then when we did that, we realized that as we rated it, you're using the people analyzer, that my partner was the second lowest rated person in the organization, through the people analyzer and we were a 22-person organization. So I knew instantaneously that this was a process for us because it really helped. So needless to say, my partner is no longer with us. That year, we went from 22 people down to 17 people, and we kept the exact same revenue. 2 years later, after self-implementing, which, I got to say, I know it's probably not the normal way to do it. We decided, we did decide to bring Mitch in to kind of give us a reset and to help us out to just, get everybody on the same page with that stuff. But 2 years later, we're a company that is both profitable, growing, looking to acquire some companies possibly, and profitable, and my partner is no longer with us. We are back up to about 22 people now, but with much more revenue.
Great introductions. You guys teed me up. Let's see if I can get us to the next slide. Okay, good. So this part of now we've got our introductions, we've got our panelists introduced. I'm gonna take you for about 15 minutes. So I ask you, I know it's hard to watch a presentation online and stay focused. I'm going to go quickly. Please hang with me. It's going to be worth it. And I'm going to teach you some principles that are so important, especially if you have a business or you are an advisor, a trusted advisor to a business that may want to sell. This is incredibly important information. So I'm going to get into that. The frustrations, if there are entrepreneurs on this call, these are just some of the frustrations that business owners have. The genius of the Entrepreneurial Operating System is that when Gino Wickman developed it 18 years ago as an entrepreneur himself, and he started the Entrepreneurs Organization chapter in Detroit, and he got to know all these really amazing business owners. They all had the same 100 problems, but they were all there was no way to categorize them. There was no way to group them. There was no way to make sense of them. And what the genius of EOS is that Gino Wickman figured out that, hey, you know what? If you can become strong in the critical components of running any business, you are going to have a better business. And I'm going to tell you what these are at a very high level and then give you a real kind of condensed version with a little bit more information. But what the EOS model shows you is, to the extent, if you own a business, to the extent that you have issues, it's because of weakness in one of these 6 areas. I can guarantee you that. And here are the components. There is the vision component. That means getting everybody on the same page in terms of what the company does, where it's headed, everyone rowing in the same direction. The people component, you got to have great people to have a great company. No kidding, but there's a lot more to it. Data is about running the business by the numbers instead of by emotion and opinion and hunches. The issues component is about having a system to solve problems as they arise for the greater good of the organization instead of having them linger forever. The process component is about having critical processes documented, written down, and followed by everybody in the business. And the traction component, you can see this looks like the wheel of a tire. This looks like a tire, and the bottom is kind of like a road. You know, use your imagination. Traction is all about execution. And the reason that we put traction on the bottom there, where it meets, the rubber meets the road, is you can have a great vision, but if you can't execute, you're in trouble. Vision without traction is hallucination. So EOS at its core is all about creating ways to execute, creating better execution. I'm going to take you quickly through some of these, all of the components, but in a quick way. The vision component. And I'm going to show you a couple of tools that we have associated with each component. And P.S. at the end, you'll have my email address. And if you want a copy of some of these tools, I'll be happy to send them to you. So our first tool is this thing called the Vision Traction Organizer. It's a 2-page document that asks the 8 most important questions anyone could ask you about your business. And I'm going to review what those are with you. Whoop, let me go back one. So, what are your core values? What are the 3 to 6 critical values that drive how you hire, motivate, compensate, and yes, terminate employees? What's your core focus or your mission or your vision? The thing that keeps your head glued on straight when you need to make decisions about where to go in the company so you can differentiate a shiny object from something strategic. What's your 10-year target? That number in the distance that you don't know how you're going to get there, that revenue number or some other metric, you're not sure how you're going to get there, but you got to know what direction you're headed in. Your marketing strategy. What's your target market? Demographic, geographic, psychographic. What are the 3 things that make you unique? Do you have a proven process? Do you have a brand promise or a guarantee? What's your 3-year picture? These words are very important. We use them very specifically. Yes, we want to have a revenue number and a profit number and some measurables, but what are those dots represent bullet points of what does the business look like in the mind of the owner and the leadership team? What does it look like in 3 years? If you have your 10-year target, then you can formulate a 3-year picture that puts you on the path to getting closer. Then we go to the traction part of the Vision Traction Organizer. What's the 1-year plan? What are the 3 to 7 most critical goals of this business in this year? 3 to 7, not 3 to 17, not 3 to 27. If everything's important, nothing's important. So we focus on having less be more. Rocks, what are your quarterly goals? We won't talk about why they're called rocks, but those are just quarterly goals. 3 to 7, again, so you can focus on accomplishing them. And then having an issues list so that you stop carrying issues around in your head and you write them down, and that's the first step to solving them. That's the Vision Traction Organizer. If you did nothing else as a result of this call, then study this document, which I'd be happy to send you, and complete it for your company. You would be ahead of where you were before you got on this call. Okay, let's see if I can keep going. Here we go. Second component, people. To have a great company, you need the right people in the right seats. That sounds like a very easy statement to understand, but here's what can happen. A right person is someone, you love them because they get the culture of your company. They embody the culture and the values. A right seat is somebody who executes really well in their job. What can happen? You can get a right person who you love in the wrong seat. They're not executing in their job. Sometimes you can have them change seats. Worst problem in my mind is you get someone who does a great job technically, but they drive everybody bananas because they don't follow the culture and the norms of the company. That's a wrong person in a right seat. You have to have the right people in the right seats in order to be successful in the long term. So, Chris mentioned People Analyzer. We have tools that we use to help you figure this out. Across the top are examples of core values. They happen to be the core values of EOS worldwide. And here are some names of fictitious employees. And I'll draw your attention to the last row, the bar. This is the level at which people have to be at or above in order to be right people in the organization. So for example, what this is saying is that Joanne here, most of the time, walks the talk of being humbly confident, whereas Martin Gilbert most of the time does not. And Ellen Smith, sometimes yes, sometimes no, but the bar is a plus. So when we have a conversation once a quarter with all of our employees, and we go to Martin, we say, you know, on this core value, you're below the bar. We need to change that. This is a great way of creating a discussion with employees that you can back up with real facts and real examples, but it really helps to have that, a tool like this to facilitate that discussion. People Analyzer, it's an awesome tool. It's very simple to use. Right seats. Instead of an org chart, we have this concept that we call accountability chart. And the idea is that instead of saying, you know, most companies have org charts, name, title, and a person. What we do is we deconstruct the organization and say, what should it look like in the next 6 to 12 months? Forget about what it looks like yesterday. Let's build the ideal framework. And we say, what are the critical functions of the business? Every business has somewhere between 3 and 8 critical functions. These are marketing, sales, operations, finance are typical ones. Then there's got to be someone pulling that all together, making these functions work seamlessly together. That's the integrator. Detail-oriented, you know, makes the trains run on time. Then there's a visionary. Sometimes there's a visionary, and that person has big ideas, 30,000-foot view, often a great salesman, often a founder, but may not like the details, may hate the details, but may come up with so many ideas that they whipsaw the organization. Every day it's a new thing. So sometimes there's a visionary, sometimes there isn't, sometimes they're one and the same person, but we deconstruct the organization and say, what's the ideal organizational structure for this business? That's how we get the issue of right people, right seats. Once we know the function, we say, what are the 5 most critical roles of that individual, of that function? The 5 most critical roles in each function. And then we go to our human resources and we say, who should be in that seat? So we don't just make an assumption that because someone is head of marketing, that, you know, that anything marketing related is theirs. We want to know, what are the critical roles? Let's specify them. Let's name them so everybody knows who's accountable for what. That's the idea here. So that's the vision component and the people component. Next is the data component. Every business should have a weekly scorecard, no matter what type of business you're in. A weekly scorecard is the half a dozen to 15 or so critical numbers and ratios that you need to know to have an absolute pulse on the business all the time. If you were on a desert island and there was no communication with the outside world, but once a week, this rolled up message in a bottle got to you with these numbers, you would have an exact sense of what's happening. Notice the construction of this scorecard. The left column, the first column is who, as in who's responsible for making sure that the second column, the measurable, happens. So in this example, let's look at sales calls. Robert. What's the goal? How many sales calls a week is Robert expected to make? It's 50. Then we go out 13 weeks, a full quarter, week ended, and we say every week when we have our weekly team meeting, is Robert on track or off track? And you can see that Robert does a pretty good job, but the week of October 28th, whoops, something happened there. So, you know, he got back on track, but the key thing is if people fall off track, you can quickly get them back on track if you measure it weekly. And you don't have to have this many measurables. Some companies I work with have 2 or 3 measurables. That's fine. I'd rather see 2 or 3 than 15. Less is more, but measure something. Really, really important. The next component is the issues component. How do you resolve issues quickly for the greater good of the company? And we have this tool and concept called the issue solving track, and this idea called IDS. IDS means identify, discuss, solve. So what most teams do when they get in a room, and they usually have a somewhat unstructured meeting, or they have a meeting of everybody updating each other on what's going on, you know, not all that fascinating. What we do is to say, if we have an issue, let's first of all have it on an issues list. Then we might have 27 issues on our issues list. Well, let's prioritize which 3 we're going to tackle first. And then we take issue number 1 and we say, what's the root cause of this issue? We don't say what's the symptom. We say, come on, let's dig deep, get to the root cause or causes. And then the people around the room, if they have a point of view, they say, I think I have a sense of what's going on. Here's what I think is causing the issue. And they state that once and only once. If someone else has a different point of view, they state what they think the root cause is once. There's no reason for these 2 people to have a dialogue that goes on and on trying to convince each other that one is right and one is wrong. You're never going to convince someone in that manner. So if they have a point of view, they state it once. And if someone has a point of view and it's the same as someone else's who's already brought it to the table, hey, save yourself some time, keep your mouth shut. It's already on the table. So we get this discuss part to be strong but tight. And then we move to the most important part, which is to solve the issue. A solve means a to do. What are we going to do? What's an action item that someone or multiple people will take by the time we have our next meeting that will solve this problem, hopefully forever? Identify, discuss, solve. It's so simple, but you'd be surprised. I'm sure if I asked each of you how effective are your meetings, your team meetings, on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, it wouldn't always be 10. When I ask that question of clients I work with before I start working with them, the average is around 5. And when they say they're a 7, and then we peel it back a little bit, then it turns out they are actually a 5 or a 4 or a 1. So this is a very powerful tool. So that's a process for issues. The process component of EOS, how you become strong in process. Every company has a handful of core processes: people, marketing, sales, a couple of operating processes, and so on. The key idea here is what most companies do, and let's take out for a minute scientific companies, engineering companies, that if they don't have a 100-page manual on the proper design of a solar panel, you know, the roof is going to cave in. We're not talking about that. We're talking about other processes where people really need to execute well, and they need to know what the process is. So identify those core processes and then document them simply. And we take an approach we call a 20-80 approach. Document the 20% of a process that gets you 80% of the way there. And the smart people will figure out the rest, ask questions as they need to. But if they have the guardrails and if they have a guidepost, things run so much more smoothly. So that's the process component. Next, we move to the traction component. The traction component has 2 tools or principles, just like all the others, and I'm going quickly, so forgive me. But the first, traction is about execution. So the first tool is those quarterly rocks, those quarterly goals that were in that vision traction organizer. You want to get your team and your people to live in a 90-day world. When someone says, oh yeah, I'm working on this and it'll be done in July, discount that by about 90%. Like, I don't care what's going to happen by March 31st. Let's focus on that. And when we get to about March 24th, we'll start thinking about next quarter. Generally speaking, you are far better off focused on 90 days at a time, because that's people's attention spans at best. The second tool or principle in the traction component is this idea of what makes a really fantastic team meeting. Along with the vision traction organizer, that's my favorite tool. The accountability chart is my second favorite tool. The scorecard is my third favorite tool. And this rounds it out, the level 10 meeting. Because what it does is it says, you know, reporting on everybody's activities, if you're sitting in a meeting where 8 people have to just say, here's what I did last week and here's what I'm going to do this week, you know, you just want to jump out a window. What you really want to know is, are you on track? So we take 5 minutes in this 90-minute meeting, which, by the way, happens at the same time, on the same day, every week, and starts on time and ends on time. We take 5 minutes and we say, good news. Everybody, piece of personal good news, piece of professional good news, gets us in the mood. Then 5-minute scorecard review. We get the scorecard out. Are we on track or off track? And if we're on track, we keep going. If something's off track, we drop it down to this thing called issues list. The ROC review. This is our 90-day goals. Are we on track or off track? If it's on track, keep going. If it's off track, drop it down to the issues list. Then we do 5 minutes of customer employee headlines. Then we look at last week's to-do list, and we're just going through the to-do list and saying to the person who was to do it, done or not done. And we want to complete 90% of our to-dos every week. Then we get to the heart of the matter, which is the issues list. And we get that issues list out. Doesn't matter how many things are on it, could have 20 items on it. We quickly identify the first 3 we're going to work on. And then we IDS those. That's an EOS verb. We identify the root cause, discuss points of view on what the root cause is. Then we come up with our solves, which are our to-dos to be done by the next week, maybe the week after at most. And then we take 5 minutes and we conclude the meeting, review the to-do list. And the most important part, is everybody gives the meeting a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being best. And put that average, take a quick average and put it on your scorecard. That's how you get better and better. EOS is all about measuring things and execution, execution, execution. That's what we care about. So that is the entrepreneurial operating system at a super duper high level. I want to reiterate that any problems that you have in the business are the result of weakness in one or more of these components. And take my word for it, because it's been implemented in 12,000 plus companies. And so this has been proven over time. And if you can become 80% strong in all of these components, you're going to have a great company. I also have, and if you're interested, email me at the end, a 5-minute assessment that you can take, literally 5 minutes, called the Organizational Checkup. I'll send you the link to it if you'd like, and you can get a read on how strong is my company in these components. You must use some system. If you have a real business, you have to have a system. It doesn't have to be EOS, but it's got to be something. You can't just, wing it. You can wing it for a certain amount of time, and then you're going to hit a ceiling, and then something bad may happen. So that's number one. We exist so that business owners get everything they want out of their business. If you have the right product in the right market, and you're growth oriented, and you're not satisfied with the status quo, but you find yourself working too hard and leaking too much energy, or something else is wrong, you need a system. EOS is one. It's the only one I know, so it's the one I teach. So that's it. And most importantly, in the context of our discussion here, is that if you're going to sometime exit your business, sell to a partner, sell to private equity, sell to another buyer. What they want to see is, can this business run effectively without you, the owner? And how hard is that going to be? And owners who don't know how to delegate and elevate, and owners who don't have processes, and owners who don't have a firm handle on the numbers, and owners who don't have people that take ownership of their accountability are going to get lower multiples while John gets 11 times EBITDA. So there you go. That's the advantage. That's the value of having a system when you want to think about M&A down the road. A quote from a client of mine who, in fact, just sold his company, his second company. And EOS is, he's on Long Island, and EOS is near and dear to him and helped him tremendously, as some of these other folks have said. And I'm going to stop there. You can get in touch with me through the chat or through any of my contact points if you want to learn more about EOS. So let me take a pause, and we can, probably go off the screen share, Roy, and just kind of go into a gallery view. There we are. Isn't that better? And now what I'd like to do is I'm going to ask Roy to kind of moderate what's in the chat. I'm not going to read what's in the chat, but what I'd like to do is just get a little bit of discussion going among our panelists in a few key areas of EOS, just a little bit of a deeper dive if I could. And Bob, maybe I'm going to start with you and ask you how you developed core values, because that's a concept that everybody uses and abuses. How did you go about it? Why was it important? And what did you learn?
And that's the starting point, in my view, for implementing EOS. And that was how it was implemented in our company. So it's a great question, Mitch. We had a 3-day off-site session with all of our key leaders, 12 different people, including myself and the implementer who brought the system in. And in those 3 days, we started with core values and spent the first half of the first day just in a very wide open core values discussion where everyone had an opportunity to talk about what they felt our company stood for, what was important in our company. We had a giant whiteboard, of course, in the conference room at a hotel where we all were completely off-site, away from the office. And it took a good 3 hours or so, maybe 3.5 hours to go through it all. And a lot of the terms we were hearing from the leadership group and we were putting up on the whiteboard, as you go through the discussion and you drill down into what that word really means, you find that you can combine words. So at one point, I think we had probably 50, maybe 60 words on the board. And then we started to spend the last hour or so winnowing that down into, as you said, I think earlier, Mitch, you want to have 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 at the most core values. What does your company really stand for? And some companies might call this a mission statement, if you will. But a mission statement doesn't really reflect the single individual words of what core values of the business are. So we ended up coming up with 5 different core value words in our process. And they were fun, accountable, integrity, teamwork, and being humble. And the interesting part about all that is, as I've said many times, at the end of that process, when we got it winnowed down to those 5 words, and they were not in any particular order on the board, we found that it spelled the word faith. Fun, accountable, integrity, teamwork, humble. And so that became sort of a internal mantra that we all use in our conversations with each other. And it leads us into, during our weekly level 10 meetings, it leads us into a core values storytelling portion where we can talk about how did our actions in the prior week illustrate the core values, any one of the core values. How did we have fun this week? How did we demonstrate humility? And sometimes it'll be, what didn't we do right? How did we fail to demonstrate the core values? And we'll tell a story about something that we did that was against the core values. So in my mind, Mitch, I think, and for the attendees on the event, core values is where it started for us.
You know, it's interesting. Anti-values are often as important as core values. And to illustrate, when I work with clients to be able to take a particular value that they settle on and come up with a couple of bullet points that illustrate it, often having the one thing that doesn't illustrate it, that is against it, is very illuminating. Yeah. John or Chris, any other points of view about either core values or people, or the people component, things of that nature that then I'd like to ask about some other areas as well. But you guys have anything?
Well, yeah, I think, I guess our story was pretty similar in that, we took in the account. We basically, the way we looked at it was we listed all of the people in our organization or around us that we really admired and wrote down the reasons why we admired them. And then went through that process and circled those things that we admired about them. And then the ones that kind of overlapped over and over again became our kind of core values that we decided what we're going to be. And like I said, and then using that, there was one piece, I guess, in the people analyzer that, maybe when you get into it deeper is also that concept of get it, want it, can do it. That the people analyzer does, really, really honed in on both not only just who should be in the organization, but where we all needed to maybe do a little bit better. As an example, one of our values is organized and accountable. And if anybody knows me, I am a terribly unorganized person, but it is a value that we have. So I know that's one of the things I have to work on regularly, to try to be more organized and more accountable in certain areas. So it's still a value that we had, but it's not something that I was strong in, and it allowed us to highlight those pieces.
Yeah, it's. I think that's a great point. When we do EOS implementations, what we try to do is, we'll get the potential values by looking at who are our stars and what makes them great, and then with the leadership team, we'll say, okay, we're going to do a people analyzer on the leadership team. Rate yourselves. And sometimes if, more than half the leadership team is below the bar on something, then my job is to challenge you and say, hey, is that an aspirational value, but not one that you really have? If you as leaders don't have it, can you expect other people to have it? So there is that real walking the talk that's part of really good values. Yeah, thanks for that. I'd like to talk about different aspects and then different elements of EOS, and maybe ask what your favorite, if you had to take, other than core values, of the other things, what got you the most mileage? And maybe John, I'll ask you that if it's not putting you on the spot. Like, is there one piece of it that you feel like we were kind of not maximizing, but then we hit, whether it's, in the area of data or process or issue solving? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it sort of had an ebb and flow as to what was the most important at that particular time and what we were executing well on at a particular time. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, we were 55 full-time team members and 30 contractors. We have operations and our clients in every state and internationally. And so it's a fairly diverse organization. But the things that initially that helped us, it was similar to what Chris and Bob said, was the core values. And one important component of that was just analyzing the leadership team. And one of the EOS mantras is, it's simple, but not easy. And one of the simple parts after we went through the process was like our core values were really evident. And when we analyzed the leadership team, first meeting, one 15-year team member, equity owner, was dismissed, not only from the leadership team, but from the company. Okay, that's not easy, okay? It was simple, It was recognized by everyone, but making that decision was critical to us moving forward. Later on, IDS became most important. We had a lot of issues similar to what Bob was saying on integration with acquisitions. And just really, I mean, there were a couple of meetings where we spent the full hour on one issue. Okay, we had 1, 2, 3, but we never got to 2. Okay, it was that important. Then you move forward a couple of years, and I noticed that when we do 1, 2, 3, it sort of became, what can we knock off the list, not what is most important. And you really have to focus on what's the most important issue when you call out 1, 2, 3 in that first volley of the IDS, not what can we solve today and get it off our plate. You've got to focus on what's the most important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. That's the power of it, and you get really good over time at solving issues because you realize that most people waste a lot of time going around and around and around instead of focusing. So, the first few times you're on the level 10 meeting, maybe you find, oh, we only got to 1 or 2 issues. And sometimes down the road, you knock off 4, 5, 6 of the whole issues list. And then part of what I do as an implementer is, once a quarter, we get in a room together, and any issues that were not addressed that are still lingering, we wipe those out. We IDS them and can't leave the room until we do. So we have a way of just getting them gone and doing it that way. So that's pretty cool. Other viewpoints from our panelists, and I want to, Roy, I have other things I'd like to ask, but I'm going to ask you if there's anything that we should interject at this moment and anything else our panel wants to say on this general subject.
Was that a question to me?
Yeah. Is there anything that you wanted to do at this moment, or should I just continue?
No, just I think you're doing great. I think
okay.
We've got a great flow going. There's a great flow in the chat, and I want people to keep it coming. I'm going to be asking people if you guys want to come up and speak as well. So if you get a message from me, you put a message up there and you see a message from me, let me know.
Great.
I think there's some questions in the chat, Roy, that if you may want to.
Yeah, go ahead if you want to.
Go ahead, Kyle. If you want to bring something up right now, that's
something you see, Kyle. Go ahead.
I did. So, Dominique, do you mind coming off mute and elaborating on your question and comment?
Hey, Kyle, thank you again for inviting me. I'm a startup, and so I thought this would be attractive to learn how to position myself for being sold and understanding what processes need to be in place to grow to a position where I'm worthy of being sold to someone who wants to buy me. But the core values piece really resonated with me because I literally did an exercise with the values deck. And every year I do that in my business at the top of the year for business planning. And I had to do it specifically because I hired a web designer, we're relaunching, and that part of the website is important. That's how people will be introduced to my company. And as a financial professional, and in the industry where there's many others who do what I do, it seems like sometimes our values are obvious, like integrity and, teamwork, but those things just didn't resonate with me. It seemed like that's obvious. You should have integrity, especially as a financial professional. So do I really need to call that out to people? And I took time to be thoughtful about what my practice would stand for and how I chose to show up for my clients in a way that I'm not sure other firms or financial professionals are necessarily doing in their independent practices. And so it took me several weeks to decide what my core values really would be and if I've shifted from them or am I aligned and if my processes support that. And it was such a great exercise. And now that I've started there, it seems like everything else that I'm doing in my business planning, and even as I hear you talk about systems and building systems and what systems am I using, if it doesn't align with my values, I already know it's not for me. So it's just gotten me so crystal clear about being aligned in my business so that the processes that I begin to implement will support my growth and I don't have to come back here. So I feel very confident that that's a part of the process that cannot be overlooked. I don't have a big team. I hired contractors and things like that. But even knowing what my values are right now is very helpful for the people I work with and who help me in my practice and in my vision. So I was just contributing that to the chat.
I think that's a great point that you make. And, you know, when you have your core values, it's not just for people you hire, it is for your business partners. And the other thing is when you talk about, I have a number of clients in financial services and wealth management, and you know, when we go through their core values exercises, and inevitably integrity, honesty shows up, and we call those permission to play values, where those are the values where, you know, if you don't have them, you just can't be in the business. And, you know, I never tell someone or a company, you can, if you want to have integrity as a core value, then hopefully your integrity is like better than anyone else's integrity, and you can make it mean something that it doesn't mean in the dictionary. But it's really, Dominique, a really good point. Thank you.
You know, Mitch, if I could, I would just add to Dominique, you know, and I agree, Dominique, that's a great story about it. To me, the extension of that is the storytelling part that you do every week at your weekly meeting. So it's great. You say, all right, we have integrity. We had some fun, you know, whatever. But to be able to tell a story about how in a specific example, we demonstrated integrity. We had this situation happen with this client, or in my case, this franchisee, and here's how we handled it. And that's a demonstration of our integrity. Or maybe we handled it poorly. And we didn't live up to our core value, and we have to learn from that. So that storytelling part, you know, brings it to life. So you can have these 5 words, but you have to bring them to life every single week. And that storytelling part is critical to bringing it to life.
Yeah. So Mitch, I mean, you know, to go back to your other question and to add to what Bob said, I think for us, the second piece that was probably the most important was really the L10 meeting and the way that they structured those L10 meetings. The first and foremost is that starting every meeting with some good news, it's so much different than starting a meeting being, what are the issues, or being angry or being, and trying to bring something out. And then sometimes you even see people struggle with that, and that becomes part of the conversation because they're not having a great day. So the level 10 meetings, just the structure of them, keeping it at 90 minutes and really trying to hold off of that, you know, hold on to that for the best that you could, being more efficient. I think that was a huge point for us, getting them on the same time all the time, getting the meeting set up and starting out with that good news that really, it made a difference. It was part of our values that we weren't doing in our other meetings. So yeah, no, I think that's important. And structuring those meetings using those scorecards is probably the second biggest piece for us.
Good. Yeah, I want to return to the scorecard. There is a question and from Roy from Shelley Miller. Can you unmute her? Shelley?
Oh, hi. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. I work in an organization called IC. We're business consultants, nonprofit business consultants. But part of what we do is we advise. We act as advisors to worker-owned businesses, specifically cooperatives. So what was really interesting to me is that when you're talking about like the core values, so there are these like principles, and what I realized was, yes, they follow these like broad principles, but it seems like the individual businesses need to have their own core values at a more micro level than the principles after listening to this. And the other thing that really stuck out to me is, you know, some of those goals is like people. And you said having the wrong people in the wrong places. And because of cooperatives, right, the people, they become worker owners and they're all worker owners. And like, how do you like deal with that? So I realized that it's really important. There's 2 things they can do. There's criteria for becoming a worker owner. And now I see it's really important they have that clear with this in mind. And then in their bylaws, building in something to be able to address what you said, having the right people in the right seats. And when you don't. And then my final thing was, I don't know if you're aware, there's a platform called Core Value. So at first I was like, oh, is he going to deal with the core values? And it's like these 18 core values of businesses, right? So I was like a little confused at first as to, are those going to be the values? But I see you meant the other kind of values, like the principles of running your business.
Everybody has different ones, but yeah. Thank you, Shelley.
Hey, Mitch, we have Kirk Newcomb has a question. Kirk, do you want to jump on and share? And then after Kirk, we'll jump to Ken, because I believe Ken has one.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I apologize.
No worries, Kirk. Welcome.
Oh, hey, yeah. So my point was that accountability can be tough, whether it's accountability to oneself or, say, accountability in an organization where you're trying to increase it and it's to other people, and it can turn into finger pointing and things along those lines. I'd love to hear some of the tough lessons that the panels experienced while trying to implement, not the rosy stuff, but the things where it's like, aha, if I could advise anybody when they're implementing how to best do it to kind of avoid things along those lines.
Great one. Anybody? Yeah, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Bob and then, John and then Bob. Okay.
One of the things that we did, Kirk, that was extraordinarily valuable were some trust building exercises, and to establish that trust between the team to where each leadership team member knows that we're here for the team and for the individual. And when everyone believes that and believes in our collective ability, the accountability isn't just upon the CEO or the integrator, it's on the leadership team. And everyone holds each other accountable. In fact, accountability came up from the ranks. I mean, everyone had permission to hold everyone accountable to our goals. Everyone knew our core values. We shared our VTO throughout the organization, preached it. Everyone lived the core value, the VTO. And so accountability was throughout the organization. And, you know, I was accountable to every team member and they could hold me accountable and vice versa. It was, but the trust and the trust exercises was the foundation for that.
That issue of you know, accountability throughout the organization. One thing that, you know, again, the key tools, having everybody in the organization on the accountability chart, crystallizing functions and 5 most critical roles. Ultimately, having everybody in the organization have a measurable, have a number. What's their number? What are they on a weekly basis? What's their number? What's their ratio? Everybody in the organization having a quarterly rock, at least one. What's their above and beyond thing that they have to get done to contribute to the company's success? All these things are really part of the building blocks, Kirk. Bob, did you have another point?
Yeah, Kirk asked the question that I asked the implementer back before we even engaged this person to come in, exactly what you brought up. And this is where I credit the implementer in doing a terrific job. I actually pulled out the agenda that the implementer gave us in August of 2015. And the first thing on here is meeting ground rules, open, honest, mutual respect. Any comment or question is fair game. Complete confidentiality between all the participants. So, you know, I think the implementer, you know, I remember saying this to Roy in a conversation a few weeks back when we talked about this event. The implementer to me was like an interventionist. You know, if you were going to hold an intervention, you wouldn't hold your own intervention, right? You wouldn't bring your entire family and all your friends to your house and say, all right, I need to have an intervention and I'm going to do it myself. So here's what we're going to do. You really need a third party, in my view, at least for us. And every group is different. Every business is different. For us, we needed someone to be that mediator, interventionist, third party person and establish those ground rules.
A lot of times it does really help. We have this expression in EOS that we call walking into the danger. So when we see something where we know that that there's unsaid stuff, you don't even need to hear what's unsaid. You can see it in the body language. Even on a virtual session, you can see it. And it's up to the implementer to say, folks, we can't go any further unless we address the elephant in the room. And and we have to do it. And we use a lot of different resources. And if you haven't read a book called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, you owe it to yourself to read it and understand the principle that when most teams are dysfunctional, it starts at the root of lacking vulnerability-based trust. Because people don't really trust each other. They can't engage in creative conflict and argue productively because they're just fearing. If they can't argue productively, when decisions get made, they're not really fully going to commit to the decision, and they're going to kind of do it halfway. And if they can't commit to them, ultimately you're going to get bad results. And so there's a kind of a cascading effect. And so if you manage a team, if you lead a team, that's a great book for you to read to see, hey, is our team dysfunctional and how do we set it back on the right path? Chris, it looked like you're about
So we didn't have the luxury of having an implementer, which I guess was good and bad in some cases. But I got to be honest with you, it was brutally tough in a lot of cases to get people to be. Now, my team, generally, with the exception of my partner at the time, were very, very honest with each other. The problem that we had is that we never felt honest with him in the room. So once we went through that piece and analyzed that really he was the struggle that we were all having, and we then kind of got him out of the room and started doing it, we then made a pledge to each other. I actually had him sign a pledge for executive leadership that said, we're going to be honest with each other. We're going to work to make TechWorks a great company, where if TechWorks is never holding you back. And when we made that pledge, I think that made a big difference, that we all kind of had an agreement with each other that we were all in it for everybody's future, not just me, but it did take some brutally honest conversations. And like I said, luckily I had a team that was willing to tell me I was a moron and my partner was a moron. And, with the help of a different mediator, we got him out. So, but it is a tough part, especially for those people who are trying to implement up, where you love traction and you want the owner to take it over or a visionary to take, and they're not ready there yet. That's what we kind of had to do, in some ways.
Roy, I think there's a question from Christopher Forsini.
Yep. Chris, you want to join us on the screen?
Yeah. Hey, how's everybody doing today? So one of the things that was mentioned before by Mitchell was, first and foremost, arguing productively. So if you can have any tips on my big Italian family as to how to argue productively, please let me know. Would love to share that with the class. But one of the things that was brought up previously was you mentioned.
Use your hand.
No, exactly. It's gotta be with pasta with a gravy.
What are you doing?
Pasta with gravy.
But one of the questions that was one of the statements that was brought up that actually stemmed a question for myself was, can this company run without the CEO? Right. So from your perspective and your experiences, during that conversation, you remove the CEO entirely. What are the 3 primary functions or operations that you would look at from that perspective when looking to purchase a company, or you have heard is used when purchasing a company?
Anybody want to handle that?
I'll add a little bit of that, because basically as I built EOS, we built out EOS, I realized that I'm really just like a figurehead in my own company now. Like, I don't do anything like I used to do inside the organization, because we really, and it's not terrible, but it is difficult at some places. It's difficult for a lot of those visionaries, people who had a role inside the organization or were engineers or those kind of things, to let some of that stuff go and figure out, now that you're free to do stuff, like, what do you do without messing up the company, right? Because there's a concept in there called end runs and those kind of things. But so Yeah, I think you can if the CEO and the other people understand that that's their role, or if they do have a role inside the accountability chart says even if the CEO has a role as the account manager, that they do that role with the same accountability as somebody else, and they don't get to not do it just because they're the CEO or that they're something else, and they still have to take care of their own role. So maybe they don't function without the CEO, but everybody knows what their roles are. And then that's kind of how we progressed. And like nowadays, really, like I said, it's really, I'm a visionary person for our organization. I get to kind of guide the ship, but if I was gone for a couple of months, I think they'd probably be happy.
I'll just chime in. One of the other concepts that EOS, the very initial concept, this is particularly true for founders and CEOs, and that is to let go of the vine and to trust your people to do their job and get out of the way. And that's, once you do that, you do find out that, just as has been said, that your team will do great, and you don't have to be there every day. And once you're acquired, you don't have to be there. I mean, it's been a year and I'm already out here feeding cows. I'm not running the day-to-day. So I was definitely disposable.
That. Yeah, and
John, this is Kyle. I got a question for you. When you were acquired, the group that bought you out, how did they envision EOS? Did they see that as something they want to continue on with the new entity, or what were those talks like?
Yeah, so we were acquired by Allworth Financial. It's public information. And we measure our firms and asset size, assets under management. We were about 3 billion. Allworth is now, at the time, they were about 4 billion. Now we're collectively about 11 billion. So our team, my role was to transition leadership over the next 3 years. That's what's in my contract, okay? and I'm like, guys, it's not going to take 3 years. It might take 3 months, but probably 3 weeks, okay? Because I've already transitioned leadership. And so our integrator, Jeff Baumert, who was really had the final say in our IDS sessions and was really, running the day-to-day, is now running 140 advisors for Allworth. Our marketing team was elevated. Everyone in our organization was elevated in the combined organization just because of the skills that they brought to the table. Now, my particular role was just a transition, which, like I say, was extraordinarily, it had already happened, honestly. Did that answer your question, Colin?
It does. And the same for Bob. I know you have bought that franchise. How was it for you implementing your current EOS with the new company you acquired? How was that process for you?
Yeah, and I would echo what John said about letting go of the vine, and Chris said as well. I mean, before the acquisition, before we acquired the other company, I had my fingers in everything. And I think that's just a founder's problem. When you start a company and you've been running it for 30 years or whatever, you tend to embed yourself in a lot of things that maybe you shouldn't embed yourself in. But that became absolutely impossible during the acquisition and as we integrated the two companies. So it was a good lesson to learn to just let go. And, I said at the beginning when I introduced myself about how much pain we were in. It's remarkable how much less pain we were in a year later. And, we didn't talk at all about quality of life here as a business leader. But boy, oh boy, it's a high quality of life to be able to have a structure that you can run the business with, get out of the way. I think John said, get out of the way, let your people run their business, their areas. And that's how we did it.
We have about 5 minutes to go. And what I'd like to do is, first of all, before I turn it back over to Kyle and Roy to wrap up, first of all, to say thanks to our CEOs who have successfully used the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and to let anyone know who's on the call that if you want more information, you can email me at mitchell@york.coach. Just my name, mitchell@york.coach. And I'd be happy to answer questions about EOS, whatever I can do to be helpful. Is there anybody that's got a burning question that they feel like must ask, or they're going to be very upset before we start to wrap up? Going once. We'll look for it in the chat.
So I'll throw one out, Mitch.
Go ahead, Roy.
From the standpoint of traction and actually getting the rubber to hit the road, I'm curious as to friction from the panelists, friction of implementing the level 10 meetings on top of functional meetings and trying to make that process effective, right? The idea of the level 10 meeting is trying to make meetings as effective as possible. Was there any friction in trying to overlap those two meetings and meeting structures, the functional meetings around projects and everything day to day, along with the larger EOS meetings about long-term vision and keeping the organization on track?
I mean, speaking for myself, I would say no, there really wasn't
we
any
didn't
friction.
have a lot of friction. I mean, we did have friction, but you just worked through it. And
I don't think I would call it friction as so much as it is that generally EOS doesn't talk about the operational meeting of an organization versus the 90-minute meeting and where they overlap or don't overlap. I think that's one of the things we struggled with, being a project-based company that has project meetings and other things that have to go on. It is something that doesn't get talked about a lot in EOS. So I think we had a little bit of a challenge of saying, no, we can get everything done in these 90-minute meetings. And so we did work on some structure of when, and part of a process, I guess you would say, when we started working out our process of when to actually get back into other types of meetings, these operational meetings versus these functional meetings, was something that was just a little bit missing in EOS. And I think it took, for us, had a little bit of a problem.
The one thing I'll say about the structure is that the level 10 meeting is about execution. So what happened? Are we on track with our weekly scorecard? Are we on track with our quarterly rocks? Our issues list is stuff that we're going to take care of and need to take care of, high priority, in the next week. Then, so that's the weekly level 10 meeting. Then every quarter, we do a quarterly, more leisurely meeting where we look at what are we going to do how do we do this quarter? And what are our new rocks going to be for next quarter, and some other things. So the weekly meeting is about right now. It's not visionary for the future. It's right now.
That's great. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Kyle, I'll turn the mic over to you as you talk about what's coming up.
I think James Rocker had a quick comment before we wrap things up.
Where is he? Where is he?
Hey, guys. I'm here. Sorry that I was late. I was actually disappointed that I got here late, so I'm sorry that I missed the beginning of it. But it's good to see everybody. A lot of familiar faces here on this call. Just wanted to share with the team here that we implemented EOS just about a year ago. We're approaching a year mark right now. Thankfully, Mitch has been our facilitator. It's been tremendous. Please feel free to grab my info from the team here. Reach out to me, maybe if you have any other questions. But I can't say enough good things about what it's done to our organization. We're not scared. So we ripped the Band-Aid off here with all people. And accountability was the biggest thing for us, man. Like, we just weren't holding our people accountable enough. And you should see the fires we started here. And it's been a lot of fun. And we've got some new people. And it's just been so exciting. The company's exploding. We had tremendous growth even during the pandemic. And listen, thank you. That's all I could say. Like, many humble thanks to Mitch and Kyle and Roy here on the team that brought us in here. So thank you, guys. Super excited to be part of this organization. Looking forward to helping as many people as I possibly can. And Chris, good to see you there, man. Great company, TechWorks.
Thanks,
Awesome,
Thanks,
friendly
James.
Competitor of ours, doing great things out there. So we're all here to help everybody. It doesn't matter even if you're in the same industry. So thanks for letting me have a couple of words, guys. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Awesome.
Thank you, James. And thank you, each and one of you, and Roy for the last slide. So hopefully this was valuable. The key of this is just to be educational and get real life stories of how CEOs have used EOS and how you can implement it in your business. So it's our goal here with M&A just to be a resource to our clients and colleagues that are in this space. We have these forums on a monthly basis. Our next one will be on March 25th. And quite frankly, marketing is actually a huge component of any M&A transaction. So when Bob is in the process of making his acquisitions, he had to control the messaging, right? And the same thing as John when he was being acquired, making sure your branding and your messaging is on point just to maintain confidentiality, at the same time maintain any goodwill and equity and in the process. So we have two speakers that are going to be giving this presentation. I think Nikki had to drop off, but I believe Andy is still on. I don't know if Andy, you want to give maybe a quick minute overview of what you're going to be discussing on the 25th?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Kyle, and thanks, panel and Mitch. It was great. I know I've read Traction. I know the EOS system, and if I still had my own company and it wasn't just me, I'm sure that I would employ Mitch, to help me out. So lots of times when we talk about mergers and acquisitions, a lot of people on this call are involved in numbers and hard facts. And so I'm in the business of vapor. I sell vapor in many ways. I sell promise. I sell psychology. That's really what marketing is. Human beings all buy the same way. It's based on survival instincts and the instincts for family and friends to respect you and love you. And that's really the basis of every purchase. So when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, marketing and branding play an incredible role, but sometimes it's kind of soft. So what we want to do, what Nikki and I want to do, is we want to discuss some of these issues of how brand and marketing really affects transactions, and maybe get a little granular and maybe even a little interactive so that you guys can have some takeaways in terms of what you would want to do with your businesses that hopefully are built to sell. So some of the things we would talk about would be like branding mistakes that can crush a deal. After the sale, how do you integrate the brand to have a brand plan between the two entities? 5 years out, how do you build and protect the brand to actually increase valuation? And also, how do you structure your own business and brand and marketing thrust to actually take advantage of situations in the marketplace that would establish a more strategic sale rather than just a book value sale or an asset sale, which, as we know, increases multiples. Protecting against last-minute brand damage. Even when a great-looking deal goes bad, one thing that comes to market is the Snapple Quaker deal. How M&A can deal out of bankruptcy. How do you take dead brands and really, make them yours and attach values to them? And some of the ones that we had tossed about in our meeting, in our education committee meeting, was Arthur Treacher's and Ovaltine and JCPenney. These are kind of dead brands, but what are they worth? And then I guess those are some of the things that we might touch on. We haven't really structured the presentation yet, but we do want to make it interactive. So we want you guys to participate. We want you to burn some brain cells about your own business and try to grab some additional value that you can deliver into the marketplace. So thanks very much. Hope you can attend.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. And John, we love the hat, by the way.
Sorry, I'm getting ready to go back to work. So.
I hear you. So we want to wrap up.
Doesn't look the same, Roy.
I appreciate all of our panel, Roy and Mitch, for leading a very engaging discussion. John, Bob, and Chris, I appreciate you guys very much. This all couldn't have been possible without our education committee. Some of the folks actually here. You just heard from Andy. Ken Pichelle of Dynamic Business Consultants. He is the chairman of the committee. He had to drop off to help a client out. Winnie Benjamin is also in the committee. And Austin Bransgrove, he's also in Texas, and he's on vacation right now with his wife and family. So I know Winnie's here. You wanted to say a few minutes, say a few things quickly before we sign off?
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and hoping that anyone that, of course, I'm sure everyone here own a business, whether large or small, that you take to heart what you have just heard on the EOS system, because that's what's going to make the world better. Even if you're not selling, it makes the world better because the employees are a better person. And so I want to thank everyone for attending.
Thank you guys again. We will send out the recording. I actually hit the recording late here, but thankfully it was live on Facebook. So we will be able to capture the full recording from our Facebook feed. And thank you guys again, and enjoy the rest of your day and be safe. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, have a great rest of your day.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.